The silence before the truth. The moment Sandra walked onto the stage, something strange filled the room. The audience did not know why their hearts felt heavy, but they sensed something big was about to happen. Everything became quiet, almost too quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. Even the host felt it. He leaned forward slowly, waiting for Sandra to speak. Her eyes were soft, but there was a sadness behind them, something old, something she had buried for years. No one knew she was about to share a truth she had carried alone. A truth connected to the one man the world admired more than anyone else, Keanu Reeves. She took a slow breath and looked at her hands resting on her lap. They were shaking. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. The host gently whispered, "Are you okay?" Sandra nodded, but in her heart, she knew she was not ready. Still, she also knew she could not run anymore. This was the moment she had avoided for so long, the moment she feared because honesty always brings pain before it brings peace. "I want to tell you something," she said softly. The audience leaned forward. Her voice held a kind of weight that made everyone focus. It was the kind of voice people use when they are about to confess something that shaped their entire life. Every camera zoomed in. All lights turned toward her. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. And somewhere backstage, Keanu Reeves himself froze. He had not planned to be near the studio that day. He had only come to surprise a friend. But when he heard Sandra's voice on a monitor, something inside him went still. He stepped closer, listening, unsure if he should enter or disappear. Sandra continued, her fingers curling into the fabric of her dress. "People think they know my life. They think they know my journey, but there is something I never talked about because I did not want anyone to misunderstand." She paused again, swallowing hard. "It is about someone I once cared for deeply, someone I trusted more than myself." The host blinked, the audience gasped. The camera operator whispered, "Is she talking about him?" Sandra closed her eyes for a second, fighting tears. A memory flashed in her mind. A younger version of herself, laughing beside Keanu under a bright Lowe's Angels sunset. They were unknown to the world then, two dreamers chasing impossible futures. They had shared secrets, fears, and hopes. They had promised to protect each other from the cruel parts of fame, but life had different plans. Success, schedules, and personal tragedies had slowly pulled them apart. Now, years later, Sandra sat in front of millions, about to reveal a truth she had locked away. She knew what would happen the moment she said his name. She knew headlines would explode. She knew people would twist her words. But she also knew this secret was not meant to stay hidden forever. "Before the world knew us," she whispered, "Keanu and I shared something that changed both of our lives." The audience gasped louder. Backstage, Keanu stopped breathing for 1 second. He placed a hand on the wall, steadying himself. He had never expected her to speak about their past. Not now, not ever, not like this. Sandra wiped her tears gently and looked straight into the camera. Her eyes were soft, filled with pain, but also filled with courage. "I think it is time people know what really happened," she said. "The truth is, I was not the woman the world knows today because of fame. I became who I am because of something Keanu did for me, something he never talks about, something that changed my future forever." The room fell into a silence so deep that even the cameras seemed to stop humming. And then Sandra finally whispered the first piece of the truth. The truth she never planned to say. The moment Sandra spoke those words, the whole studio felt like it stopped breathing. People in the audience sat frozen in their chairs, afraid to even blink. The host stared at her with wide eyes, shocked but careful, like he was holding something fragile. The air was so heavy that even the sound of Sandra inhaling seemed loud. No one knew what she would say next. All they knew was that something big had been hidden for years, and now it was slowly rising to the surface. "It started a long time ago," Sandra whispered, her voice shaking as she looked down at her hands. "Back when I was struggling, back when I almost gave up on everything." Her words hit the room like a quiet storm. The audience leaned forward, sensing this was not a simple confession. This was pain mixed with gratitude, a memory that shaped her soul. Backstage, Keanu's heart pounded so hard he felt it in his ears. He took a step closer to the screen showing Sandra's interview. His face softened. He remembered that time, the late nights, the silent cries, the fear Sandra carried in her chest but tried to hide behind her bright smile. He remembered because he had been there, he had seen it all. Sandra continued, her voice trembling. "I never told the media. I never shared it with fans. I never even let my closest friends know. But Keanu was there in one of the darkest chapters of my life." The host placed a hand on his chest, visibly moved. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Sandra took a shaky breath. I was young, I was scared, I was new in Hollywood, I did not know who to trust. People were kind on the surface, but the world behind the cameras was very different. I felt alone. I felt lost. And then something happened that almost destroyed my spirit, something I still find hard to talk about. The audience held their breaths. But Keanu noticed, she said softly. He saw something was wrong even when I tried to hide it. He kept asking if I was okay. He kept showing up when I needed someone to stand beside me. He did not judge. He did not push. He just stayed. For a moment, her voice cracked, and she wiped a tear with the back of her hand. One night, she continued, I reached a point where I thought I had no strength left. I felt like everything was falling apart. I went to a quiet place in Los Angeles thinking I needed to make a choice about my future, and I thought I was alone there, but I was not. She paused, the host leaned even closer. The audience's hearts raced. Keanu followed me, she said. Not because he wanted to control me, not because he wanted anything from me, but because he cared. He saw I was hurting and he refused to let me disappear into my own sadness. Backstage, Keanu closed his eyes. He remembered that night too clearly, the cold wind, the empty bench, the tears on Sandra's face when she thought no one could see her. He remembered how fragile she looked in that moment. And he remembered the silence between them, a silence filled with pain, truth, and trust. Sandra looked at the audience, her eyes shining with emotion. He sat next to me without saying a word. He just stayed until sunrise. That night saved me. I did not know it then, but his presence became the turning point of my life. The crowd murmured, touched by the honesty in her voice. I never thanked him properly, she whispered. And I never told the world how important that moment was, but it changed everything for me. It helped me rise again, and even after all these years, it still lives in my heart. She took another deep breath. But that is not the whole truth. There is something even deeper that I have never shared, something that only he and I know. The audience gasped. Keanu's eyes opened, his breath froze. He whispered to himself, she remembers. Sandra looked into the camera with trembling eyes. And today, I think it is time to share that part too. The night everything changed. The studio fell into a deeper silence than before. It was the kind of silence that made people's hearts beat louder inside their own ears. Sandra's eyes softened, but behind that softness was a storm she had kept locked away for years. She breathed slowly, as if she was walking through memories she had spent half her life trying to avoid. That night was not only about pain, she said softly. It was also the night Keanu showed me a kind of kindness I had never seen before. The audience felt a wave of warmth and sadness at the same time. There was something almost sacred about the way she spoke his name, like it carried weight, like it held a hidden story the world never knew existed. Backstage, Keanu placed a hand on the edge of the screen. He remembered the night too clearly. He remembered how the streetlights painted soft circles of gold on the empty sidewalk. He remembered how Sandra walked without direction, her shoulders shaking, her breath breaking in quiet sobs she tried to hide. He remembered choosing to stay behind her at a distance, making sure she didn't feel chased, but still knowing she wasn't safe alone. Sandra continued, her voice becoming deeper, more emotional. I sat on that bench because I felt like I was at the end of my road. Hollywood was too loud, too cruel, too fast. I felt like I did not belong. I felt like I was drowning, and then he came. She took a breath, and her lips trembled. Keanu walked to me slowly, not wanting to startle me. He just sat down. He did not tell me what to feel. He did not judge me. He did not say I was weak. He simply said, I am here. And that one line broke something inside me. I cried like I had never cried before. The host looked touched. The audience wiped tears quietly. That night, Sandra whispered, he listened to everything. All my fears, all my heartbreaks, all my doubts about myself, and he never once interrupted. He never once told me I was overreacting. He just gave me space to be human. She smiled faintly, but it was a sad smile. And when the cold wind made me shiver, he took off his jacket and placed it on my shoulders. I remember thinking that no one had ever cared for me that gently. Keanu backstage felt his throat tighten. He remembered that moment. He remembered the way her hands clutched the jacket like it was a lifeline. He remembered wanting to protect her from everything, not as a man trying to be a hero, but as a friend who hated to see her break. But there is something I never told anyone, Sandra continued. Not even him. The host leaned forward, almost afraid of the answer. What was it? She swallowed hard. Before sunrise came that night, I made a promise to myself. A promise that one day I would tell him the real reason I was so broken, and I never kept that promise. Keanu's eyes widened backstage. He whispered, "Sandra, what did you hide?" Her fingers intertwined tightly as she prepared to reveal something she had buried deep inside her heart. "The truth is," she said, her voice shaking, "I was not only struggling with my career. I was struggling with something more personal, something I did not want anyone to know. And Keanu was the only person who got close enough to see how scared I really was." The audience leaned forward, breathless. "I thought I was protecting him by keeping it secret," she said softly. "But maybe I was only protecting myself." Then she looked straight into the camera, her voice trembling like a fragile thread. "And today, I want to finally share that secret." The audience gasped, the host froze mid-breath, even the camera crew paused. And backstage, Keanu stepped forward as if drawn toward her words. His eyes softened with fear, confusion, and a kind of pain no one else could see. Whatever she was about to reveal, he knew it would change everything. The secret she thought she would take to her grave. The audience could feel their hearts beating faster as Sandra lifted her head. Her eyes glistened with emotion, but there was a new strength in her voice, the quiet strength of someone who had run from the truth for too long and finally accepted she could not run anymore. "The secret I kept," she said softly, "was not about fame, not about the industry, not about money or success. It was something that changed my whole life long before I ever became known." The host leaned forward slowly, careful not to interrupt. The silence in the room felt almost holy. "Before I met Keanu," Sandra continued, "I went through something painful, something I did not tell my family, something I thought I would bury and never face again." She clenched her hands together, her breath trembled. "I was betrayed by someone I trusted, someone close, someone who made me doubt myself so deeply that I stopped believing I deserved happiness. I carried that wound for a long time, pretending I was fine." The audience tightened their lips. Many had been through their own silent pain. Her words touched something familiar inside them. "That night," Sandra whispered, "when I sat on that bench thinking I had no future, it was not only Hollywood breaking me. It was that old wound finally catching up to me." She paused to wipe her tears. And Keanu saw it. He saw something in my eyes that no one else ever saw. He understood my sadness without me saying a single word. Backstage, Keanu felt his chest tighten. He remembered sitting beside her, feeling her pain without any explanation. He remembered wanting to tell her she was strong, she was worthy, but he had known she wasn't ready to hear it. Sandra continued, her voice trembling but steady. "I did not tell him the truth that night. I was scared he would look at me differently. I was scared he would feel sorry for me. I was scared I would lose the only person who had shown me real kindness." The audience listened, as if every word was made of glass. "So I stayed silent," she said. "And he respected that silence. He never pushed. He just let me be myself with all my broken pieces, and that is why I kept the secret, because he was the only person who made me feel safe again." She took a deep breath, and the host finally found the courage to speak. "And now," he asked gently, "why share this today?" Sandra's eyes softened. "Because secrets grow heavier with time, because people need to know that kindness matters, because the world sees Keanu as a hero on screen, but they do not know how many lives he has touched quietly behind the scenes. Mine is one of them." The audience whispered softly, touched by her honesty. Then she added something that made everyone's heart stop. "But there is more," she said. "Something I never told him, something he never knew." Keanu backstage felt a cold shiver run through him. He whispered, "Sandra, what are you about to say?" She looked into the camera with trembling courage. "After that night," she said, "I disappeared from his life, not because I wanted to, but because something unexpected happened. Something that changed the path I walked for the next years." The host looked stunned. "What happened?" Sandra hesitated, her hands shaking again. "I got an offer to travel," she said, "to a place far away. It was supposed to be for a short time, but when I arrived, something happened that forced me to stay much longer than planned." The audience murmured. The host asked quietly, "Did you tell Keanu?" Sandra shook her head. "No, I left without saying goodbye, without explaining, without thanking him. I thought I would return in a week, but that week turned into months, and those months turned into years." The audience gasped. Keanu backstage pressed a trembling hand against his forehead. He never knew. He had always wondered why she disappeared. Sandra whispered, "He thought I walked away, but the truth is I never stopped thinking about him, not for a single day." The studio fell into a deep emotional silence. "And the reason I stayed away," she continued, "is something I have kept hidden all this time." Her voice cracked. "And today, I think Keanu deserves to finally hear it." The revelation that shook the room. The moment Sandra said those words, the entire studio leaned forward as if pulled by an invisible force. Everyone could feel that something huge was about to be revealed. Even the lights seemed to dim, as if giving her space to speak her truth. The host folded his hands gently, afraid to break the moment. The audience held their breath, and backstage, Keanu stood frozen, his heart beating in painful, uneven rhythms. Sandra took a deep breath, gathering strength from a place she had not touched in years. "The reason I left," she began softly, "was because the opportunity I received was not just work, it was a chance to heal, but it also came with a cost." The host nodded slowly, signaling her to continue. "I traveled far away," Sandra said. "Far from Hollywood, far from noise, far from expectations. I went to a small town where no one recognized me. I wanted to rebuild myself. I wanted to find my strength again, and for a while, I did." A gentle sadness passed across her eyes. "But then something happened," she whispered. "Something I never expected, something that changed my future forever." The room grew still. "I got sick," she said quietly. "Not the kind of sickness people could see, not something easy to understand. It was something inside me, something that weakened my spirit every single day." The audience's eyes widened. A few people covered their mouths. The energy shifted from suspense to deep empathy. "It was a medical condition connected to all the stress and trauma I had gone through," she continued. "I was losing weight. I could not sleep. I felt tired all the time. The doctors said I needed complete rest and emotional stability. They told me I could not return to my old life until I healed completely." She swallowed hard. "So I stayed. I stayed in that town for much longer than I planned. I stayed because my mind and heart were not ready to face the world. I stayed because I was afraid the person I had once been was gone forever." Backstage, Keanu's eyes filled with emotion. He whispered to himself, "Why didn't you tell me? I would have been there." Sandra continued with a trembling voice. "For months, I fought to heal. I spent my mornings walking by a quiet river. I spent my afternoons writing letters to myself, trying to understand my pain, and every night I thought about Keanu." The host looked at her with kind, tearful eyes. "Why him?" he asked gently. Sandra smiled sadly. "Because he was the only person who showed me real kindness without asking for anything. Because he made me feel seen when I felt invisible. Because on the night I wanted to give up, he stayed until sunrise. That type of kindness never leaves your heart." She wiped her tears once more. "But I also felt ashamed," she admitted. "I felt weak for falling apart. I felt guilty for disappearing. I felt scared he would think I used him for comfort and then walked away. So I stayed silent. I thought distance would protect both of us from pain." The audience murmured softly, touched and heartbroken at the same time. "And the letters I wrote?" Sandra whispered. "I wrote many letters for him, letters I never sent, letters where I told him how grateful I was, how sorry I was, how much his kindness meant to me. But every time I tried to send one, my fear stopped me." The host gently asked, "Do you still have those letters?" Sandra slowly nodded. "Yes, I kept all of them, and today I brought one with me." The audience gasped. Backstage, Keanu's hand slipped against the wall. He whispered, "She kept them." Sandra reached into the side pocket of her dress, her fingers shaking, and pulled out a small, folded paper. "This," she said softly, "is the first letter I ever wrote to Keanu during the months I was away. And for the first time, I want to read it." The audience fell silent, waiting. Even the host closed his eyes for a moment. And backstage, Keanu stepped forward to the side of the curtain, as if something deep inside him was pulling him toward her words. Sandra unfolded the letter slowly. Her voice trembled, and then she began to read. The letter that brought Keanu to the stage. The entire studio fell into a silence so deep that every small sound echoed. Sandra held the letter with trembling hands, the paper worn from years of being folded and unfolded. She took a slow breath. Her voice was soft, almost breaking, as she began to read words she had never spoken out loud. "Dear Keanu," she whispered, "I do not know if I will ever send this. I do not know if I deserve to, but I want to say thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I was breaking. Thank you for sitting beside me on that cold night. Thank you for giving me a moment of peace when my world was falling apart." The audience felt their hearts swell. Some people placed hands over their mouths. The host blinked back tears. Sandra continued reading. "I disappeared because I was scared. Not scared of you, but scared of myself. I felt weak. I felt ashamed. I felt like you showed me a kindness I had not earned. I thought if I stayed, I would break your heart with my sadness, and I could not do that to you, not after everything you did for me." She paused, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "But the truth is, I missed you every day. I carried your words in my heart. I carried your kindness in my soul. And one day, when I am strong again, I hope I will find the courage to tell you all of this face to face. Until then, I am sending you my silent gratitude from far away." She lowered the letter, her eyes shining with emotion. "I wrote this years ago," she whispered, her voice barely steady. "And today, I finally found the courage to read it." The host swallowed, clearly moved. "Does Keanu know any of this?" he asked. Sandra shook her head slowly. "No, he never knew. I never gave him the chance to understand why I left. He probably thought I forgot him. But the truth is, he was one of the reasons I kept going." The audience murmured softly, touched by her honesty. And then something unexpected happened. The stage door behind the host opened. At first no one noticed, but the audience in the back gasped. The host turned. Sandra froze, her breath caught in her throat. Because standing in the doorway, with gentle eyes full of emotion, was Keanu Reeves. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the moment would break. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just walked quietly toward Sandra, his footsteps echoing through the silent room. Sandra stood up without thinking, her hands shook. She whispered, "Keanu, you heard." Keanu nodded softly. His voice was warm, gentle, almost fragile. "I heard everything." The host stepped aside, giving them space. Keanu's eyes glistened as he looked at Sandra. "I always wondered why you left," he said. "I thought maybe I did something wrong. I thought maybe you wanted to forget that night." Sandra pressed a hand to her chest, tears falling freely. "I never wanted to forget. I didn't know how to face you with all my pain." Keanu took a slow breath. "You didn't have to hide," he said softly. "You were never a burden. I cared because I wanted to, not because I expected anything. I just wanted you to be okay." Those words broke her. Her shoulders shook as she cried quietly. Keanu stepped closer, his voice calm and steady. "You didn't owe me anything, but I'm glad you told your story today. I'm glad you're stronger now. I'm glad you lived through it." Sandra whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't trust myself enough to tell you." Keanu shook his head gently. "You survived, that's what matters, and I'm proud of you." The audience wiped their eyes. The host looked stunned by the raw emotion in front of him. Then Keanu did something the world would talk about for years. He reached out and gently took Sandra's hand. No drama, no spotlight moment, just a quiet, sincere gesture filled with respect. "You don't have to walk alone anymore," he said softly. "Not now, not ever again." Sandra covered her mouth as new tears fell. She leaned toward him, not for romance, but for comfort, for truth, for closure, for a connection that had waited years in silence. The audience erupted in heartfelt applause, not loud and chaotic, but warm, grateful, emotional. Sandra whispered, "Thank you for coming." Keanu smiled softly. "I couldn't let you stand in this truth alone." And for the first time in years, the past between them finally healed.